Hello and welcome to the class today. So, the topic for today is memory and forgetting. These are the very important topics as mentioned in the subject related with the subject educational psychology. And the learning outcomes for today's class will be to understand and define the concept of memory and forgetting, to explore various methods to increase memory and reduce forgetting, of course, to devise new ways to elevate memory standards and reduction in the forgetting part. So, first of all, we need to understand what is memory, what is forgetting, and how we can, make new concepts in our classrooms, the ways in which we teach, so that we can make our students, retain more information which you give in the class. So, memory is a process, it refers to the process of remembering and association. So, it plays a very important role in our learning and psychological growth. So, through memory, our past experiences, we handle new situations. It helps us in our relearning, problem solving, and thinking. Since memory is central to almost all cognitive processes, such as perception, thinking, problem solving. So, psychologists have attempted to understand the manner in which any information is committed, is saved in our memory. So, the mechanisms through which it is retained over a period of time, the reasons why it is lost from memory, and the techniques which can lead to the memory improvement. For example, if we think about cool, the word cool, we associate this with a pleasant feeling, and thus we can distinguish it from hot. So, we very well understand what is hot and cool. Suddenly, we remembers in our brain. So, memory is the term given to the structures and processes which are involved in the storage and subsequently retrieval of the information. So, whatever is stored in our mind. So, in later part of the class, we will discuss what kind of memory we have and how do we retrieve the older information. So, memory is involved in processing vast amount of information, and this information takes many different forms. Example, images, sounds, or meaning. So we, bring in our brain many information through various procedures. So let us now take a look at the various definitions given regarding memory. And the first one is given by Drever, who says memory is that characteristic which underlines all learning, the essential feature of which is reflection. In narrow sense, it is recall and recognition. So these are the words recall and recognition, which we also find in our Bloom's taxonomy in the knowledge part, in the cognitive domain knowledge part, where we talk about recall and recognition. And this is how, based on this, the first step for teaching anything in our class is based on recall and recognition. So we have to, prepare the educational objectives in this way that the student is able to recall the thing again and again whenever the situation arises, and recognize whatever you have taught, so that whenever they want to apply in their knowledge, in their real life situations, they can do so. Woodworth and Marquis has said memory is mental power which consists in learning, retaining, and remembering what has previously been learned. So whatever we have learned previously, it can be, it can be learned again, it can be retained for a longer time and remembered for a longer period of time. Then Rayburn has said the power that we have to store our experiences and to bring them into the field of consciousness sometime after the experiences have occurred is termed as memory. So sometimes memory is also based on our experiences of life. Whatever experience in a day, we experience a lot of things. So it all, stores in our memory, and how at the time of requirement we retrieve that information. So it is all known as memory. These are the stages of memory. First, we encode something, like we have studied in the process of communication, that whenever information is given to us, we try to, accept that, then store it, storage, and then whenever is required, we can retrieve at that time. So these are the stages of memory. So let us now discuss what is encoding and how it is associated with memory. So when information comes into our memory system from sensory inputs, actually, it needs to be changed into a form that the system can cope with so that it can be stored. Think of this as similar to changing your money into a different currency when you travel from one country to another. So this is how our memory stores, and this is how we try to change currency when we travel from one country to another. For example, a word which is seen on the whiteboard may be stored in our minds if it is changed into a sound or a meaning. So this is how it depends very much on the procedure in which the encoding is being done. So as we all know that if the thing is taught to us in a different way, we will always remember that, and if it is taught in a traditional way, we may forget it soon. So there are three main ways in which information can be encoded. The change of the information which has been provided to us. First is the visual part, that is by showing a picture or a movie. Acoustic way, which is related with the sound, any kind of sound we uh, uh, put before our students. Semantic, like it should have some meaning behind that. So, for example, how do you remember a telephone number? Nowadays, we remember, more often we remember the mobile numbers, though it is a very tough task. We can only remember few numbers, and sometimes we forget to, forget our mobile numbers also. So, you have looked up in the phone book. Whatever you have seen in the phone book, you are not able to remember that. If you can see it, then you are using visual coding. If you are just learning it by seeing it, you are using visual coding. But if you are repeating it to yourself, because whenever you will be doing the repetition, you will definitely remember it for a longer time. And you are using acoustic coding by sound, by anyone else is repeating that to you, or many a times you have heard that number, so you will be able to retain that for a longer period. So evidence suggests that this is the principal coding system in the short-term memory, and that is acoustic coding, the sound-related coding. So when a person is presented with a list of numbers and letters, they will try to hold them in short-term memory by rehearsing them verbally. So rehearsal is a verbal process, regardless of whether the list of items is presented acoustically, someone if reads them out, or visually if it is written on a sheet of paper. The principal encoding system in long-term memory. Before that, we have talked about the short-term memory. Now, if we talk about the long-term memory, if we take a look at the slide again, the acoustic coding and the visual coding. So in this way, it goes straightly in our short-term memory. And if we talk about the long-term memory, it is regarding related with semantic coding, with the meaning part. So however, information in long-term memory can also be coded both visually and acoustically. But if it is coded in semantic way, it will be for a longer period. Then the storage and memory, the next stage of memory, this concerns the nature of memory stores. That is, where the information is stored, how long the memory lasts for, the duration of it, how much can be stored at any time, the capacity, like in our storage capacity of our phones, storage capacity of our laptops or the RAM, and what kind of information is held. The way we store information affects the way we retrieve it. So, there has been a significant amount of research regarding the differences between short term memory and long term memory. So, most adults can store between 5 and 9 items in their short term memory. Miller put this idea forward and he called it the magic number 7. He, though, says that short term memory capacity was 7 plus or minus 2 items because it only had a certain number of slots in which items could be stored. So, if we talk about the short term memory, Miller didn't specify the amount of information that can be held in each slot. So, indeed, if we can chunk information together, we can store a lot more information in our short-term memory. So in contrast, the capacity of long-term memory is thought to be unlimited. Information can only be stored for a brief duration in short-term memory, that is from 0 to 30 seconds, but long-term memory can last for the lifetime. So this is the difference between the short-term memory and long-term memory. So the next stage of the memory is retrieval, and this refers to getting information out of the storage. So once it has been, put forward in our storage system, we need to retrieve it sometimes. So if we can't remember something, it may be because we are unable to retrieve it from the back of our storage system. So when we are asked to retrieve something from memory, the differences between short-term memory and long-term memory becomes very clear, because now if you are able to retrieve it, that means that that has been stored in your long-term memory. And if you are not able to remember anything or retrieve the information when required, so that means that was for a shorter period of time, that was not stored properly. So short-term memory is stored and retrieved sequentially. For example, if a group of participants are given a list of words to remember and then asked to recall the fourth word on the list, participants go through the list in the order they heard it in order to retrieve the information. And when we are talking about the long term memory, so it is stored and retrieved by association. There should be a meaning behind that. So this is why you can remember what you went upstairs for if you go back to the room where you first thought about it. So sometimes this happens with us, with our relatives, with our friends, that when you want to say something, you suddenly forget and you want to remember it, so you go to the same place where you thought of that process, and you will immediately come to know that what was the purpose of your going other way. So this is the same example. You went upstairs, but you suddenly forget what you went for there. And when you came back to the room where you first thought about this thing, you suddenly remembers, this was the thing I went upstairs for. Organizing information can help aid retrieval. So this is very important. If the information which is stored in our memory is in an organized manner, if it has been produced in an organized manner, so it can be retrieved easily. You can organize information in sequences, such as alphabetically, by size, or by time. So how do we remember the alphabets from A to Z? Because we practice it, we go in a sequence. So anytime you can pronounce, recite the A to Z alphabets. Imagine a patient being discharged from hospital whose treatment involved taking various pills at various times, changing their dressing and doing exercises. If the doctor gives these instructions in the order, what should be done in the morning, what should be done in the afternoon, and what should be done in the evening time. So if this is has been given in this manner, so they must be carried out throughout the day, that is in sequence of time: morning, afternoon, evening. So this will help the patient to remember them, and ultimately by practicing day by day, the patient will remember what to be done at what time. Now, these are the components of memory. So these are the four basic components or the factors which affects memory, like the learning part. Whatever we experience, we try to learn that. So if it is learned in a permanent manner, that it can be retrieved anytime from our memory. Retention, the word which we were using, retain the information which has been provided to you. Recall or retrieval, if you are able to recall what has been you have experienced earlier, or retrieve at the time when you were expected to, like at the time of exams, you are expected to retrieve the information which you have studied for throughout the year or throughout the session. Recognition, you are able to recognize whatever you have stored in your memory. So at the time when you are not able to recognize the thing, then that means that your memory is really poor and you need to improve that. So learning is the process of registering impressions or acquiring new knowledge, skills, attitudes, and so on. So what is meaningful learning? It is paying attention to the meaning of whole material, the relationship among the different parts. It relates the meaning and significance of the material with other things that previously was learned. So this is how the learning process goes on, and we learn new knowledge, skills, attitudes. Now, what is retention? So after the active learning process, the retention will take place, which is comparatively passive. This is the ability to keep things in mind and remember. Then the recalling memories of life. So this is the act of remembering something. Recall is greatly affected by emotions and motivation, both at the time of learning and subsequently. Recognition. Recognition is awareness of previous experience. It is complete familiarity without any mistake. So this is, in this way we can say that whatever experience we have taken, that means that we are able to recognize that again. We are familiar with that without doing any mistake. Now we will move on to the types of memory. We have discussed about short-term and long-term memory, but now we will go that in detail. So short-term memory is remembering something that you recently saw or heard. So an example of short-term memory is remembering the color of the car which just passed by you. So short-term memory is very brief, as the name suggests, and it only lasts about 5 seconds sometimes. And long term memory contains information that you have recorded in your brain in the past. An example of long term memory is the gift you received for a birthday 5 years ago from someone. So, long term memory has no limit on capacity and can store vast amount of information. Now, these are the other kinds of memory like habit memory or implicit memory. Habit memory is the function of the body and is related with motor mechanism. That is, what once we have learned, we will not be able to forget it. Like example, riding bicycle. After so many years, if you have not, ride down a bicycle, still you will remember how to ride a bicycle. So this is a habit memory. Remote memory. It is lifetime accumulation of data about a wide variety of topics. It seems to diminish with age. So this kind of memory is, for a particular time period, and it can diminish with the increasing age. Rote memory. Result of rote learning by children, they remember without understanding. They just want to memorize it. They just want to do the rote learning, and that will only be for a shorter time only. Then there is episodic memory. So this is the memory of specific personal experiences, the different episodes which have taken place at the various times of your life. Sensory memory. Sensory, as we all know, that it is related with our sense organs and the impressions, how we are able to retain the knowledge. The first sensory memory is the auditory memory. With the help of sound, by hearing it, we remember these things. Visual memory is the memory of visual impressions we have. Tactual memory is related to touch, which is very rich. Olfactory memory, the memory of smell, how we sometimes smells the ground after the first rain, the dry ground, when it gives that kind of smell, which we cannot forget. We whenever we smells that kind of fragrance, we know that what is happening, what kind of event is taking place outside. Then there is gustatory memory, that is the memory related with taste. Sometimes you have eaten something outside or at a certain place, and you remember the taste which you took at that time by eating something. So these kinds of memories are related with the senses. Then there is a procedural memory, which is a subset of implicit memory, the habit memory. So it is a part of the long term memory. It is responsible for knowing how to do things, also known as motor skills. So these all, memories which we have been talking about are the parts of long term memories, because whenever we need, we remember these things. So you don't have to, delve into your memory to recall how to walk each time you take a step. You know how to sleep, you know how to eat. So these are the, memory which are a part, habit memory, which is a part of your life. So examples: playing of piano, playing tennis, doing swimming. Then there is semantic memory, and it is not connected to personal experience. Semantic memory includes things that are common knowledge, such as the names of states, the sounds of letters, the capitals of the country, and the other basic facts that are not in question. So, knowledge, we all know that the sky is blue. We know how to use a knife and fork, when to use it, remembering what a cow looks like. Then the episodic memory is a person's unique recollections of a specific event or an episode. People are usually able to associate particular details with an episodic memory, such as how they felt, the time and place, and other particulars. Examples: where were you when you heard the news about the Malaysian airplane crash? You will certainly, remember that I was at that place when I heard first time about that crash. First movie you went on to watch in a cinema hall, the first gift you have received from someone, the first gadget you have owned, at some point of time. So you will remember that episode. So these are all, examples of long term memories. The episodic memory: what happened last birthday, what is the, largest mountain in Australia, or which is the highest point of Himalaya mountain, then which is the highest peak of Mount Himalaya mountain. Then there is procedural, that memory, that you remember that how to play baseball, you remember how to play chess. So you cannot forget easily these things. How the memory can be measured: the way in which it is recalled, relearning. Sometimes we forget something and we try to learn it again. So we can do that. So retention of memory can be done with this. Recognition of the things which we have learned earlier. Reproduction: how you utilize that, apply that knowledge when you are required to. Now the next concept which is related with memory is forgetting. So the first systematic exploration actually of memory is credited to Hermann Ebbinghaus. He was the German, a psychologist of late 19th century in 1885, and he carried out many experiments on himself and found out that we do not forget the learned material at an even pace or completely. Initially, the rate of forgetting is faster, but eventually it stabilizes. So, this means that after his experiment, he was able to say that we remember certain things and sometimes we forget some things. So, why do we forget? So, there are two simple, answers to this question. First is the memory has disappeared. It is no longer available, maybe due to some accident or some surgery. Second, the memory is still stored in the memory system, but for some reason it cannot be retrieved. So maybe with the passing age, we are not able to remember correctly. The first answer is more likely to be applied to forgetting in short term memory, and the second to forgetting in long term memory. So, forgetting information from short term memory can be explained using the theories of trace decay and displacement. So, these are the two theories which we generally talk about in the when talking about the concept of forgetting. And forgetting from long term memory can be explained using the theories of interference and lack of consolidation. So, this is how we need to remember that. And now for understanding the concept of memory and forgetting, we also need to do the recall and recognize part, and we also need to understand so that we don't forget whatever we are learning in this video. So forgetting from long term memory can be explained using the theories of interference and lack of consolidation, and here in short term memory the theories are related are trace decay and displacement. Okay, so let's go on to the trace decay theory of forgetting, which is related with short-term memory. This theory relates to both short-term memory and long-term memory, and also relates to lack of availability. So this theory suggests short-term memory can only hold information for between 15 to 30 seconds unless it is rehearsed. So after this time, the information decays or fades away. So this is the theory which says that the information is stored only for 15 to 30 seconds. That is why it is known as short-term memory. So this explanation of forgetting in short-term memory assumes that memories leave a trace in the brain, and these traces are decayed. That's why we sometimes forget things. So a trace is some form of physical or chemical change in the nervous system. Trace decay theory states that forgetting occurs as a result of the automatic decay or fading of the memory trace. Trace decay theory focuses on time and the limited duration of short-term memory. So memory tends to get worse the longer the delay between learning and recall. The longer the time, the more the memory trace decays, and as a consequence, more information is forgotten. In any real life situation, the time between learning something and recalling it will be filled with all kinds of different events. So this makes it very difficult to be sure that any forgetting which takes place is the result of decay rather than a consequence of the intervening events. So, support for the idea that forgetting from short term memory might be the result of decay over time came from research carried out by Brown in the United Kingdom and Peterson in the United States. The technique they developed has become known as the Brown Peterson task. Now, what they wanted to do, they carried out their studies in 1959, and they wanted to find out the duration of short-term memory. So they wanted to test their hypothesis that information was held in the short-term memory for only around 20 seconds. So after that, it disappears if rehearsal is prevented. So this is very important points which we have learned, that you need to rehearse, you need to recall, you need to bring anything which you want to learn for a longer time, do it more practically. So therefore, aiming to prove that the duration of the short term memory is only around 20 seconds, also to investigate if information is lost from short term memory through decay. So the method which they adopted was, participants were presented with the sets of trigrams. These are the nonsense syllables in sets of three, example BCM. So this word do not make any sense. So these kind of syllables were given to the participants, which they were then asked to recall in order after a delay of 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, and 18 seconds. So this was how they wanted to prove that the participants will forget everything in 20 seconds. So an experimental method was used. The fourth was the time delay, and the DV was the number of trigrams recalled. So participants were given an interference task of counting backwards in threes from a random three-digit number to prevent rehearsal. So that some participants are not able to remember whatever has been shown to them. So they were given a different task, like counting backwards in threes from a random three-digit number. So that there can be a intervention in between. So recall had to be 100% accurate and in the correct order in order for it to count as correctly recalled. So that doesn't mean that you can say something, but you have to say it, you need to write it or tell it orally, that it should be in a correct order. So the result was, the percentage recall was after 3 seconds was 80%. Then after 6 seconds, it reduced to 50%. And after 18 seconds, it was less than 10%. So recall decreases steadily between 3 and 18 seconds, suggesting that the duration of the short-term memory is not much more than 18 seconds. So what was the conclusion? The conclusion was that the memory trace in the short-term memory has just about disappeared after 18 seconds. So information held in the short-term memory is quickly lost if proper kind of rehearsal is not done. This supports the hypothesis that the duration of the short-term memory is limited to approximately 20 seconds. They also concluded that this is evidence that the short-term memory is distinct from the long-term memory, as the long-term memory has a much longer duration. That is, the results also support the multi-store model. So Peterson explained this rapid loss in terms of trace decay. The memory trace fades over time until there is a point of time when it disappears completely. So at this point, information is forgotten. Now we talk about the displacement theory from short-term memory, and it seeks to explain forgetting in short-term memory and suggests it's due to a lack of availability. So the short-term memory store in Atkinson and Shiffrin's 1968 model of memory, and it was assumed to have certain characteristics, including a limited capacity, and if information was not rehearsed, it would be forgotten. So displacement theory provides a very simple explanation of forgetting. Because of its limited capacity suggested by Miller to be 7 plus or minus 2 items, a short-term memory can only hold small amounts of information. So when short-term memory is full, new information displaces or pushes out old information and takes its place. The old information which is displaced is forgotten in short-term memory. So this is how displacement takes place. It was also assumed that the information that had been in the short-term store for the longest were the first to be displaced by new information. So this is the law of the practical nature, that whatever information we are putting it in our storage, we need to displace the earlier information. Similar to the way in which boxes might fail off, to reach to the conveyor belt as new boxes are put on one end. So the boxes which have been on the conveyor belt, the longest drop off the end. So this is how when you try to collect your luggage when you get down from an aeroplane at the airport, you wait for your luggage to come, and that the luggage is rotate is put on the conveyor belt for rotation, and there in this way these boxes can we can look into the example of these boxes, and the box which is being reached to the last level, the longest level, that will be the memory which will stay on for a longer time. So, support for the view that displacement was responsible for the loss of information from short-term memory came from studies using the free recall method. So, a typical study would use the following procedure. Participants listen to a list of words, usually 2 seconds per word. They are then asked to recall as many words as possible. So, they are free to recall the words in any order, hence the term free recall. Now we move on to our next theory, that is interference theory, that is related with long-term memory. And interference theory states that forgetting occurs because memories interfere with and disrupt one another. In other words, forgetting occurs because of interference from other memories. So there is a proactive interference, which is pro means forward, occurs when a person cannot remember new information because he is, confusing it with the older information. Then there is retroactive interference. Retro means the backward part. It occurs when you cannot remember old information because new information has interfered with it. So previous learning can sometimes interfere with new learning. Example, difficulties we have with foreign currency when traveling abroad. Also, new learning can sometimes cause confusion with previous learning. So when we, start learning French, it may affect our memory of previously learned Spanish vocabulary. So this is how sometimes interference takes place. So interference is thought to be more likely to occur where the memories are similar. So, for example, confusing with the old and new mobile numbers, students who study similar subjects at the same time often experience interference. So, like we have discussed with the French and the Spanish vocabulary. So, in the short term memory, interference can occur in the form of distractions so that we don't get the chance to process the information properly in the first place. Example, someone is using a loud drill machine just outside the door of the classroom where we are not able to understand what is being taught in the class. So, that can be a distraction, and that will be, a reason for our short term memory. Then there is lack of consolidation in long term memory. That means the previous accounts of forgetting have focused primarily on psychological evidence, but memory also relies on biological processes. For example, we can define a memory trace as some permanent alteration of the brain substrate in order to represent some aspect of a past experience. So, when we take in new information, a certain amount of time is necessary for changes to the nervous system to take place, the consolidation process, so that it is properly recorded. During this period, information is moved from short term memory to the more permanent long term memory. So, the brain consists of a vast number of cells called neurons, which are connected to each other by synapses, and synapses enable chemicals to be passed from one neuron to another. So, these chemicals are called neurotransmitters, and it can either inhibit or stimulate the performance of neurons. So, if you can imagine a network of neurons all connected via synapses, there will be a pattern of stimulation and inhibition. It has been suggested that this pattern of inhibition and stimulation can be used as a basis for storing information. This process of modifying neurons in order form, new permanent memories is referred to as consolidation. Now, there is another theory, that is retrieval failure theory in long term memory. And retrieval failure is where the information is in long term memory, but it cannot be accessed. So such information is said to be available, that is, it is still stored but not accessible. That is, it cannot be retrieved at the right time. So it cannot be accessed, because the retrieval cues, the hints are not present. So when we store a new memory, we also store information about the situation, and these are known as retrieval cues. When we come into the same situation again, these retrieval cues can trigger the memory of the situation. So, retrieval cues can be external or internal. External is related to the context, that is, in the environment, example, the smell, the place, it is related to that. And the internal retrieval can be related to the state which we are in, like the inside of us, example, physical, emotional, mood, if you are drunk, if you are happy, angry. So retrieval cues, if we talk about the external part, it may be based on the context, the setting or situation in which information is encoded and retrieved. So examples include a particular room, driving along a motorway, a certain group of people, a rainy day, and so on. So you may have experienced the effect of context on memory if you have ever visited a place where you once lived, or you ever visit a school, your old school. So often such visit helps people recall lots of experience about the time they spent there, which they did not realize that was stored in our memory. If we talk about the internal dependent cues, the basic idea behind state dependent retrieval is that memory will be best when a person's physical or psychological state is similar at encoding and retrieval. So, for example, if someone tells you a joke on Saturday night after a few drinks, you will be more likely to remember it when you are in a similar state. So, at a later date, after a few more drinks, stone cold sober on Monday morning, you will be more likely to forget the joke. So there will be more likely to, if a person may be alert, tired, happy, sad, drunk, or sober. So when the information was encoded, actually, they will be more likely to retrieve the information when they are in a similar state. So people tend to remember material better when there is a match between their mood at learning and at retrieval. So this also, related to concentration part, the mood in which we are, the positive mood or the negative mood, and if the events which the memory is related to it is having a personal relevance. So these are the measures of retention, how we measure that we are able to retrieve. So memories may be retrieved in three ways: recall, recognition, and reconstruction. Recall means remembering of previously learned information. Free recall, recall of items in any order. Serial recall, recall of items in order in which they were learned. Paired associate recall, recall of a second item based on a cue supplied by a first item. So these are the pairs associated with. Recognition is the identification of previously learned information, as for example from a number of answer choices in a multiple choice test. So this is the biggest example of recognition. Reconstruction is rebuilding of a scenario from certain remembered details. There may be a certain situation like amnesia, which is also responsible for forgetting. So it is the inability to remember events from the past because of some psychological trauma or physiological trauma, such as brain damage resulting from a blow to the head. The memory loss is usually limited to a specific period. So there are two kinds of amnesia, like retrograde amnesia and anterograde amnesia. Retrograde amnesia is the ability to remember happenings that preceded the traumatic event producing the amnesia. And anterograde amnesia is the ability to remember happenings that occur after a traumatic event. So people sometimes forget things because they find them too unpleasant to think about. So this may also be the reason. Such an occurrence is called motivated forgetting. So Sigmund Freud attributed many memory failures, particularly involving painful childhood experiences, to repression. That means we try to repress the thoughts we don't want to remember anymore. The process of keeping disturbing thoughts or feeling, related to our unconscious level. So then there are certain biological also factors related to our memory, and at the neuron level, a deficiency of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine is a factor in the dementia, total forgetting of the things, known as Alzheimer's disease. So administration of the neurotransmitter has slowed the disease's progress but not prevented it. So reduced levels of the neurotransmitter glutamate have been associated with the disorder. Serotonin, another neurotransmitter, is also thought to be the important in memory functioning. Eric Kandel and James Swartz, in a study of sea snails, found that serotonin is released as they learn. At the structural level, if we talk about, then if there is a damage to the hippocampus, part of the limbic system, which is situated in our mind, it has been associated with memory difficulties. Now, what is important for us as a teacher is to learn the strategies for boosting memory, not only of ourselves, but also of our students. So always remember to focus your attention and ask your students also to pay attention to anything they learn. It should be done timely. The study sessions should be done according to the timetable, by taking proper breaks, so that there is no burden on you to learn everything and keep it in your memory. Organize the information properly. You will be able to remember it clearly. So this is why you prepare timetables when you prepare for your exams, when you study for your exams. Use visual imagery like concept mapping, mind mapping. These are very helpful in this. Use a mnemonic device. We will discuss about the mnemonic device later. Explain it to a friend. So that will be a rehearsal of your memory. Reduce interference within a topic. So what factors are interfering to understand a topic? You need to reduce that. Counteract the serial position effect. how you can organize things in a serial way. Use some contextual clues or hints so that you remember the some things. You need to develop certain clues for that. Sleep on it. Sleep is very much necessary to boost your memory. And remember to take a proper sleep. A healthy person needs to take 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So that doesn't mean that you study all night by sacrificing your sleep and you will be able to remember anything. So this is very much important. You should not neglect that. So these are the memory improvement techniques which as a student you can also adopt, and as a teacher we can also adopt. So the will to learn. If you are not willing to learn, you don't want to understand, no one can force you to learn anything or remember anything. You need to pay interest and attention. Overlearning, sometimes the information overload can be dangerous to us. Meaningfulness. You should always find meaning behind anything. If you are doing the rote learning, you will not be able to understand. Follow the principle of association. The reason behind everything. Why, how, what. So these questions should come up in your mind. Using as many senses as possible. So you need to utilize your sense organs. Internal interest. So the here comes the part of role of motivation also. Provisions for change and proper rest. So you need to take proper rest also. Sometimes you need to give your mind some rest so that you can begin afresh and learn the new things. Repetition and recitation. So you need to repeat again and again, you need to revise again and again, rehearsal should be done. Then only your memory will be permanent. Making use of SQ4R techniques. So Thomas Robinson developed this strategy for effective learning and memorization. Survey, question, read, reflect, recite, and recall. So these are the 4 R's: read, reflect, recite, and recall, and survey and question. So if you follow this technique, you can also, boost your memory. Then making use of mnemonics. Now, what is mnemonics? This system makes use of visual imagery to provide useful association and connections for remembering the required materials. So sometimes these are the tricks you need to learn. Sometimes your coaching institutes, your teachers tell you that how you can remember certain things. Example, the peg word method, or this method here in the picture we can see that these are the fist, the backside of our fist, where we try to find out, remember the days of the month. So sometimes we are confused in this month, how many days are there. So starting from this one, upper mountain, that is, we assume that this month has 31 days, and the lower part has the uh, less 30 days. So this is how, if we do this, we will always remember that in which month how many days are there, and you will never forget. So this is how we can prepare some acronyms. The first word we can take and just make it, some senses in that, and you will be able to remember. Like, for example, we sometimes tell our students how to remember your the order of solar system, the planets in that. So this is how they can remember this. My very educated mother just served us noodles. So we have to remember this, and just by going by these alphabets, we are able to understand that this is for Mercury, this is for Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. So this is how we will remember the correct order of the planets in our solar system. So these are the techniques which we need to understand, which we need to develop, and need to tell our students also to learn. So this is how the memory works. The information goes, the sensory registers, then it can be decades, the short-term memory, the medium-term memory, the long-term memory, which can be recalled at any time. So I hope you are able to understand that this is very much important to go through the memory and forgetting process, so that we can understand that how we can improve our memory as teachers, and also help our students to concentrate, to learn everything, try to retrieve the things which are required at various parts of our life, So you can go through various references, and the work has been done at various international institutions levels also. And there you can find more about the concepts of memory and forgetting. What are the reasons behind that, and how we can, adopting certain techniques, can do away with this kind of forgetting things. Okay, now let us move on to evaluation questions. And the first question is, which of the following can enhance memory? The options are massed practice, staying awake for as long as possible after studying, rote memorization, rehearsing. So the correct answer is rehearsing. Just by doing rote memorization, or staying awake for as long as possible after studying, that does not mean that we are able to enhance our memory. We need to rehearse, we need to revise, and this is the clue for our enhancing of memory. The next question is, what are 3 reasons people forget? And the options are decay, ineffective coding, interference, retrieval failure, overlearning, repression, deprocessing, retrieval failure, deprocessing, decay. And the appropriate reason for that is the decay, ineffective coding, and the interference thing. So these are the reasons why people always forget. Next question is, what is the idea that people forget things they don't want to remember? So this is one of the defense mechanism option. And this is one of the part is repression, motivated forgetting, psychogenic amnesia. And all of the above is the correct answer, and all 3 are the ideas based on which people sometimes want to forget the experiences which are not good to remember. They don't want to remember such things. Next question is, most people find they have no problem riding a bicycle to classes in college, even though they haven't ridden once since they were young. So what type of memory can account for this? The options are semantic memory, episodic memory, procedural memory, or explicit memory. And the correct answer is procedural memory, or the habit memory, in which we have discussed that once you have learned how to drive a car, how to do swimming, how to climb a mountain, how to ride a bicycle, this is the habit we have learned in proper sequential way. And whenever we do it again, this procedure we will never forget, and we will be able to do it after some practice. The next question is, what does the misinformation effect refer to? So the options are distortion of memory by information provided after an event, overestimation of the ability to recall events correctly, inaccurate recall of the origin of information, none of the above. And the correct answer is distortion of memory by information provided after an event. So this is the distortion of memory relates to the misinformation part. The next question is, the retrieval of what has been stored in memory is called. The options are recognition, recall, relearning, or reconstruction. And the correct answer is recall. So retrieval, if we have to do of our earlier memory, then it is related with recall. The next question is, semantic and episodic memory are 2 kinds of. Options are short-term memory organization, retrieval process, long-term memory organization, rehearsal process. And the correct answer is long-term memory organization, as we have seen that many of the types of memory are related with long-term memory organization, and semantic and episodic memory are also kinds of long-term memory. The next question is, the short term the memory store holds information for up to about. So we have discussed it in the experiment, and the options are 20 seconds, 40 seconds, 30 seconds, 50 seconds, or 80 seconds. And the correct answer is 30 seconds. So maximum the information is held for 30 seconds, and after this we tend to forget. Next question is, semantic memory is considered to be very unstable, very unpredictable, very stable, or very dynamic. And the correct answer is very stable, because it is, we try to learn the meaning behind everything. So that is semantic memory. The last question is, mnemonic means something that is related to learning, memory, perception, or meaning. And the correct answer is memory, as we have seen that it is one of the strategy techniques which we can make use of while we want us or our students to remember few things which are, we are not able to remember in serial or in a particular order. So with this, we come to the end of the topic. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next class.